Hello and welcome to episode 90 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is the venerable Markhawkman.
Hey, how you doing?
And the venerated Greendragoon.
Ooh, I've been upgraded to venerated.
Better than vilified. Or other V words I could go with.
I'll take what I can get.
And tonight's episode marks our 2-year anniversary. We actually a little bit past it. We started on or around February 6th, 2013. And we thought it only fitting that we bring back HippieJohn, who was our co-host for how many? 68 episodes?
68. See, I was thinking, where's my V word? You know, I was the vilified, I thought, but you know, who knows?
Visited?
Visiting.
Visiting.
Yes, there we go.
So visiting co-host for the evening. But before we get to anything else, we do have a little bit of news. Cryptic Frost posted this afternoon that the plan is to have the Foundry back up on Thursday. So that would be a 2-week turnaround, which is pretty decent.
Pretty good.
Obviously, reviews were left on, probably accidentally, but I don't think that we had any problems that I know of, as far as with anybody's missions.
Nobody's reported any issues, at least on my end.
Yeah, I've been keeping on the bug forums, so keeping up with that sort of thing. So
my missions are all seemingly working just fine. So
what's that? A Foundry update and nothing broke?
I know, right?
just waiting for the.
It wasn't much of a Foundry update.
Well, actually, something did break. The top 3 thing broke the rest of the game with its lag, apparently, or contributed to it anyway.
I'm sure it had something to do with it.
Yeah. So, but before we get into too much else, there was something I forgot to mention when we were talking about the new way sector space is going to work. So I tweeted this to Smirk, but I want to get your guys' input, see what you think. I think when that update is made, all of the Spotlight missions should be taken down.
I love it.
You haven't even heard the rest of it yet. You're just in favor of massive purge. Okay, so you take them all down, and then the community team, they get a hold of the authors. Any way they can try. I know they can send out emails, they can send in-game mail, forum PMs, whatever. You give everybody the option to make any updates they want to make, and have them respotlighted. They could obviously give everybody the option to set new directions. That'll be a big one. Do any other fixes they might want to do. Things have been broken over the years, or the thing that I want to do to my Spotlight, which is update it to the Odyssey uniforms. So you take all these down, you give them the option to do the updates and have them re-spotlighted, or give them the option to leave it unspotlighted. Just revert it to a normal mission. Obviously, some authors are long gone from the game. They might not respond. Their mission just goes back to being a normal mission. No big. But what it might do is clean up the Spotlight list a bit. The ones that are there would be in good working order. They would be up to date. And some of them would drop off, which I think, having a cleaner Spotlight mission list would make it easier to start doing new regular Spotlights.
Well, I think it's the kind of thing that should rotate every quarter year anyway. A different list of 10 missions that are Spotlights or something, Get more activity for showing more authors' work. That's all.
Well, my first thought is that this is very similar to when they updated ESD, and people had to redo all of the explanations for where to go to find this, that, and the other.
Sure. Yeah, it will be very similar to that.
I was actually just thinking about the fact that Cryptic's going to have to update all of their mission location descriptions as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Smirk did tweet back that it was something to think about for sure. So we'll see what happens when it comes to it. Tumor Boy says, yes, delete all the Foundry missions. Start over.
I don't know. I've heard that it would be a whole lot easier to port over Neverwinter's Foundry if there weren't any pesky existing Foundry missions in the way.
I can see how that would be. but I'm okay with that because I don't want it. I want some things from it, but I don't want the whole thing. That's just my thought.
Well, if they do port over Neverwinter's Foundry, they should give people the option to transfer their Foundry characters to, live server characters, because I like Tetten.
That'd be impossible. We know it. I mean,
probably.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
We like our Foundry test characters, but if we've had them for years, I mean, my Foundry test character, I've given. I mean, he still earns dilithium. He still earns whatever, and it just wouldn't be fair. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I'm on the opposite because I've put like no effort or thought or anything into my Foundry character. He's just, a test guy.
Well,
Yeah.
He's a crash test dummy.
Mine's in the mid-50s and has, she uses a T5U version of one of the Ryza event ships.
See, mine isn't any kind of high level or anything like that, but just through the gameplay of testing my own missions, like when I run the whole mission to test it to make sure it works, I get experience from doing that. When I run even just one map, I get experience for doing that if I take it to, if I have the end chopped off at that point or whatever. So it's been, 2 years or so, probably actually more at this point that Foundry character's been building up, but he's got a little bit of stuff.
Well, in Tetten's case, she actually got most of her experience from duty officer missions.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mine's not even high enough for that.
I was going to say, I think mine's still lieutenant.
So, she'd just pop in, quit whatever duty officer missions she can. Then I go and edit things. And eventually, when I do a map preview, I collect the DOF missions and quit more.
So, since it's our 2-year anniversary, I kind of went back and was listening to our very first show today. And I realized I'd never really talked about sort of the hows and whys of starting this podcast, not even on that very first one. So I kind of wanted to tell that story a little bit. I think probably a lot of people assumed it was kind of in response to Podcast UGC, because there were a lot of complaints and grumblings at the time that, they weren't a Foundry podcast anymore and all that kind of thing. And to some extent, that was kind of in my head a little bit, but it's not the primary reason. The primary reason I started the show is because of a little thing that probably nobody remembers anymore called The Great Link. Ali Mack, who is a really excellent Foundry author, but has since moved on to other things, started a segment of Primetime UGC called The Great Link, which is essentially just a group of authors, talking about mission building and writing, and they'd have a new author on each time. Thought it was great, but obviously it took a bit to produce since it was done with demo record and pre-recorded and put together with episodes of Primetime UGC. And they started getting few and far between, and then eventually it became clear that you weren't going to get any more. But I still thought it was a great thing, and I thought, why don't I start like a podcast like that? So it's just audio, cuts down on a lot of the work, gets easier to get episodes out with frequency and regularity. And that seemed like a good idea, even though I knew nothing about podcast. Oh, and Captain PF Dennis is saying it was him and Ceridium who did The Great Link. Apologies for that. My memory is not my greatest asset, frankly. And he said, yeah, I couldn't do it anymore because of Ally Mac's schedule. So in any case, that ended, and I thought it was still an awesome thing to do, even though I didn't know nothing about podcasting. Captain PF Dennis helped me find some recording software, and I started talking to some people about, trying to find some co-hosts and everything like that. Now, not to take away from the three of you guys, because I've never regretted having you guys. You guys are great, awesome co-hosts. But you were not the first people I contacted. I talked a little bit to, people like Rogue Enterprise, Captain Revo, and
if I remember right, the initial inquiry you sent to me had Bazag as one of the people you were considering having as the regular.
Same.
I was talking to Bazag bit. I can't remember why we didn't end up having Bazag on regularly, but we've had him on as a guest many, many times.
I think it was just I thought you mentioned at some point that he just didn't have the ability to commit to doing it regularly.
That
although
might have been it.
He was, at the time, he and Galactrix, I think. Galactrix is in the chat room, I think. But at the time, I think Baz and Galactrix were talking about doing something, and he was really excited about that. So he didn't say yes to this one. That's what I remember.
Aha, joke's on him.
This was a long, long time ago, wasn't it? I mean, obviously, when we first started talking, the four of us, it was months before we actually started the show.
Mm-hmm.
And if you recall, we were in the middle of what people call the Foundry War, or they were calling it at the time.
That thing that we agreed not to talk about the first episode.
Yes, it's the thing we essentially chose not to talk about because it was so contentious and they're so crazy on the forums. And now we've grown.
I was crazy.
We no longer take the forums into account when making decisions.
Wait, when did you do
Tumor
that
Boy will
in the
find that
first
funny.
place?
It was essentially just an argument about Foundry rewards, basically, which obviously we still do. Maybe not quite so heated, but we definitely still do.
Yeah, I think the exploiters were a much bigger issue back then, too.
They were. At that point,
Now they've learned to stay in the shadows.
Well, it's not even that. There hadn't been time yet for any of the when that was going out, when that all was going on, none of the fixes had come out yet. You could still do the stand at one panel and just all day long collect dilithium. None of those fixes were in yet. So now
it was back in the dark days when they had the things where you could key a dozen clickies and stand at a console and just go and click the button over and over.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit different atmosphere as far as mission rewards go at the time. So let's see. Obviously, we had the awesome experience of having our community manager at the time, Brandflakes, join us as our surprise guest for episode 1.
Join us blind too.
Yeah,
I was surprised.
It's very, very brave of him because there was all this contention on the forums, and then we started this up, which is completely, the timing was completely independent of that. It was just, we were ready and it was time to go. So, and he had no idea what we were going to sound like, what tone we were going to take, or anything like that. So, but it was great having him, and we got to talk about spotlights and his kind of philosophy about spotlights and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome having a community manager who would spend time playing the game and just look up Foundry missions at random, play them, and then if you really liked them, he'd make them a spotlight.
Yeah, he would get in touch with authors and.
Mm-hmm.
So was the Foundry Spotlight submission feature up back then? Or did
Yes.
that not come till later?
I think there were some things added to it over the years.
Because there was a time before the current submission process where you kind of had to get Brandon's attention because there was no official submission. There's no submit button. He had to go manually go find them and then get somebody to spotlight them.
I think, but I think back then, I know that my challenge winner from 2 years ago had just been spotlighted, and it had been a really easy process of like pressing a button. So
Yeah, because that was actually one of the first one of the things we talked about in our first episode was your spotlight mission. Because I think I had just played it. Because we were working on the challenge after that. We were working on those missions. It was the Tholian challenge, and I think the one right before that was the one that you won.
it was.
Or I should say the first challenge that you won. Now that you and Dragoon are tied for this most recent one.
Yeah.
But yeah, the old process. I mean, I think Brandflakes he took some recommendations, I'm sure, but I think he used to go and play some that he thought might look interesting, and I think that's how he found mine, because I certainly didn't. You know, my KDF boys or my KDF mission, I should say. You know, I hadn't talked to him about it or say, you know, hey, play my mission. It's awesome. You should
Right.
spotlight it. You know, he just, you know, randomly contacted me over email and said, hey, I liked your mission. I want to spotlight it. So let's see, other stuff that we talked about. Let's see, HippieJohn, you were talking about how you people thought you were lazy because you didn't make full custom maps. So has that changed in 2 years?
No, no. I have tried over the last 2 years to make a full custom map, you know, a sky castle or what have you. One thing that occurs to me is that authors are different people and they have different skills. The difference between Dragoon and my challenge entries that both appealed enough to people to win in this last one is perfect. To me, is like you said during the show when you reviewed them, to me it kind of highlights that. Like, I don't have the visual, I don't know what it is, whether it's the visual creativity or the connection to the program to make to make a city out of nothing and out of props. I can't look at the back of a console or the side of a table and see it as a part of a wall. It just, my mind doesn't work that way. But character stuff and plotting, and that's a strength. And, you know, I'm not, it's one of those I'm not like, shy about saying, hey, I'm pretty good at that. So I focus on my strengths rather than, trying to learn to do something that in every attempt I have made just ends up frustrating the heck out of me. So I just keep playing to my strength, which is, character writing and plot. So.
I remember we spent a good deal of time talking about, that of adapting cryptic maps and trying to find just the right piece to cover up something that you didn't want. I think you were talking about making a space station transporter room out of the Odyssey Bridge.
Oh, I've done that. It's still sitting in one of my saved missions.
Well,
that was back before we got the asset.
I actually didn't start with doing full-blown custom interiors either. I have done many different redresses of existing maps. Some of them are some pretty radical redresses. I mean, because in one of my, I think the very first mission I wrote for any of the Foundry challenges, I took one of the generic ship interiors and covered the entire interior in ice. After I did
that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
I like that.
Also, I made it so that there were a bunch of pipes bolted to the ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a way that a lot of us start out, is that, taking something existing and starting to add some things to it.
Well, well,
And
well,
I didn't do a full custom map until my third map, or my third mission.
well, for me, it was a matter of uh, you know, doing the whole baby steps thing. It's like I started by uh, taking a map, placing a few objects on it to give the player something to work with. Um, and it just steadily got more elaborate. Granted, some of my early work, when I look back at it, I scratch my head and wonder why I did it that way. And just like delete. Okay, now I'm going to rebuild it so that it actually works.
I have gone back and revisited my very first full-on custom map, and I'm thinking, and I spent the whole time thinking to myself, God, why did I build it that way? I mean, it was right smack on the ground of the map instead of way up in the air like you might normally do, with more experience that I know how to do.
For my very first Foundry mission, Treasure Hunt with Ketan, one particularly awkward thing that I did is I made it so that one of the important hints you get is actually in the default dialogue of an NPC I put in this random location. That, granted, this is one of those. It's actually a platforming mission that, let's face it, you need some real skills to complete this mission without using occasion. But I put this NPC in one of the locations you have to walk through, and you kind of needed to stand there and watch what the default text is that pops up above her head in order to get one of the hints as to what you're supposed to do. Because I took one of those desert maps that have the giant stone mushrooms everywhere, and I made it so that the point of the mission was to run along the top of the giant stone mushrooms and find a box that was on top of one of the mushrooms. Needless to say, most, but not all, of the stone mushrooms are too far apart for you to be able to actually jump between them. So, you have to figure out exactly where the right mushrooms are.
This is something that I've, kind of developed over the years when I'm playing somebody's mission and it's, obviously a first-time author or, somebody who's pretty early in their Foundry career. I sort of look for how far they are along in the process of, starting to add things to maps and turning maps to their own use instead of just sticking the cryptic map on, sticking a few objectives on, and calling it good. All of us have been somewhere in that process. And, you kind of get a feel for, okay, this person they're getting a real feel for it. They're getting, they're taking a map and making it their own.
And really, I think that no matter what your skill level, it's always a process of trying to improve whatever your skill is.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe your next mission is only a little bit more complicated than your previous one, but you're trying new things, you're playing around, you're learning. That's really where the fun is.
This actually reminds me of some of the things that I learned about the Foundry back then. Is that, this was back before I really had a firm grasp of the limitations of the Foundry and the most efficient ways of doing things. So one of my missions, I had this big elaborate dialogue that is set to I actually had it as a generic map dialogue, when looking back, it should have been a mission dialogue, because, you complete a mission objective, this dialogue pops up, you read through it, and then you do the next objective. But I set it as a generic map dialogue for some unknown reason, which, when I originally did it, created several glitches because I had several, equally generic map dialogues, and the game, for whatever reason, kept getting confused about which one to show at which time.
Well, one of the things there were several things I was thinking about in, who I contacted to be co-hosts on the show, and one of them was, kind of experience level. Obviously, I've been here since the dawn of time, as far as the Foundry is concerned, or just about. And I got you guys who are all in various stages of your Foundry making histories.
I was brand new.
You were pretty brand new, even though you had won a spotlight. You won a competition.
That was my second ever mission.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I only had the one out, and I'd only had it published for like 6 months.
Which brings me around to you, Dragoon, because the next note I have from our first episode is that you started off by talking about how you were working on part 2. And
Guess
you didn't
what?
finish part 2 until 77 episodes later.
I finished it though.
You did finish it.
Oh, wow.
That reminds me, I never did finish making part 2 to Bavat's Legacy.
Mhm.
I've worked on it, but I keep getting distracted by doing other things.
I have exactly the same problem, because none of the missions that none of my own missions, essentially, that I've talked about, I have finished. The 3 missions I've published since we started this podcast are 2 challenge missions, and what was the other one? Purity, the Purity series.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it doesn't take another 2 years for Boulevard.
For part 3.
One would hope as I get more efficient as I go.
Get a little
along.
faster.
Well, I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised at how well my New Year's mission came out, considering that I put the whole thing together in 1 week.
So, you can make perfectly good missions in a short time frame.
Yeah.
And I was able to take the time to figure out how to make a nearly perfect duplicate of the Linnea NPC, since I wrote the mission under the assumption that I would be able to have Linnea as a person who is actually on the map that you can talk to, then later realized that we don't actually have her as anything but a mission contact.
Well, I'll tell you, that's the one attribute that I advise all Foundry authors to have, is flexibility.
Yeah, you might.
So you're gonna get in there, and you're gonna have to change things to suit the editor.
Well, I didn't really change my mission concept. I just okay, well, if I don't have a pre-made costume, then time to do it the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You didn't just give up or completely, rage quit or something. You're like, okay, okay, plan A didn't work, so plan B is I make one myself.
Well, I would argue that right there is what makes a truly successful Foundry author. Is just that willingness to keep going with it even after you hit a wall.
Absolutely.
Well,
so
I actually ended up using a rather interesting technique for it, simply because of the whole thing of getting the face just right. That was a bit challenging. Oh well.
So the next thing I have on my notes is that in our first episode, we were rather gushing over the import-export tool. Obviously, we didn't know that it was doomed not long for this world on the execution block.
What did we actually have it by then, or were we just talking about?
Yeah, no, we had it. We spent a lot of time talking.
Tool, you mean the costume one?
Yeah, costume.
Yeah.
Have your character go to the tailor, save a costume, then import it into Foundry so that you could, have an exact duplicate of one of your. either one of your captain characters or one of your bridge officer characters.
You
running
could
around.
also use
as exact at the time because we were missing a lot of costumes at the time, so you often couldn't get it exact.
Yeah, I realized that quite quickly since I tinkered with it when I made Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, because I decided that since at the end you end up with this three-way conference between the Vorta, some Federation representatives. I'm not going to call them ambassadors, but representatives. One of them is Iridian. So you see how this would be, shall we say, not ambassadors, but
Sure.
And of course some Orions. And when I did that, I actually used the import tool on several of my characters to see how well it would work, and realized that certain characters had their costumes come out horribly bugged, and I could make a new costume, but it wouldn't really look the right way. One of them was I tried using Chuffed. Chuffed uses the old TMP uniform for whatever reason, and no, that one just horribly failed utterly.
Yeah, there was
It
quite
would
a lot
work
of.
a lot better today because we have a lot more costumes hooked up.
Mhm.
Well, the-
It would work. It would work better because we have things like the Mako armors and things like that. I mean, that's what people were trying to bring in, and every time they would try to load it, or at least very often, it was crashing the client. And I mean, I remember at the time.
I think actually, if I remember correctly, I think the crashing was more to do with you could import some of the game NPCs and edit them.
Yeah, like all of
I
the
think
contacts.
that was part of it.
Yeah,
And
but
then
I mean, regardless.
our invisible contact that we came up with was
Yeah.
crashing the game.
Also,
I
I
was
still
gonna
have
say that regardless of what was crashing it, I remember at the time, Dragoon, you said the thing that made the absolute most sense. You don't leave something in that is client crashing, like a lot of the time when it's used. You just don't. And so as much as I miss it,
the game company's not
as-
going to that.
yeah,
If
as
I
much
remember
as
right-
I miss it, that really sits with me, what Dragoon said back then. You just
Um,
don't leave it in. It was crashing the client again and again. So
If I remember right, one of the devs actually, or maybe it was Cryptic Frost, actually stated that it wasn't a client crash that would cause them to pull it. It was actually an issue that was causing. It was causing issues on the server, and that propagated to the client and caused the client to crash. So each time you had the client crash, something bad would happen on the server too.
Which makes it even worse. I kind of remember that as being one of our first instances of really interacting with Cryptic Frost.
uh-huh.
Yeah, he did kind of appear around then. No, but I mean,
And now I'm getting this image of Gandalf appearing in a flash of light. I have returned.
a wild Cryptic Frost appears.
Oh my.
Something just occurred to me. I never tried saving the costume of a photonic bridge officer and importing it as a Foundry contact.
It wouldn't have worked.
Probably
Which, by
not.
the way,
I'm wondering just how horribly wrong it would have gone. And
but by the way, before we get too
we all
far,
did a lot of experimenting with that thing, didn't we?
I
Yeah,
actually didn't do too much experimenting with it. I used it to move created NPCs that were used in my missions. That was about. I used.
Well,
it to
yeah, that's
random
what I
mayhem
really
around,
used it for.
like that. Yeah.
That's what
I-
I really used it for. But obviously,
I mean,
we
I
did
never
keep
actually tried to save off any of that madness that the thing was letting me create. I was like,
Not-
this
not
is
like the,
not right.
the green Cations in bikinis, right?
Oh god.
oh, I totally saved off the debugged NPC costumes. Part
Of
two
course you
makes
did.
liberal use of them. The
well, at one point in time, there was on the live server that ability to mix and match parts from different types of costumes.
Yeah.
which would actually gave you the ability to dress up your bridge officers with off-duty equipment. Granted, this was apparently buggy and something that was never meant for players to be able to do, which of course is the reason we can't do it now. But you could do that, make a costume, import it in Foundry, and maybe possibly actually use it.
But I'll tell you the thing that we were actually talking about the most in our first episode with regards to the import-export tool was trying to find ways to put ships into ground maps.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see
Which
eventually.
I think we found out after that episode that you couldn't actually publish
Yeah.
a mission that.
Wrong.
No, I tried it.
Did
Were you able to do it? Because I was never able to.
I did that in the Beta Rana incident. I used a costume import-export tool to make Tholian ships that were used as contact, so that instead of talking to a Tholian, you talk to a ship. And in one of the ground maps I did as part of the mission, I actually left one of them in the map as an NPC you could walk up to, and well, not interact with, but look at. It wasn't in a map where you would actually be able to see it while playing the mission, but, you know, it was in there somewhere.
Can't imagine that's still there though.
Well, to be honest,
If he's never changed it, it might be.
yeah, this is that mission that got horribly broken, and I haven't managed to fix it yet. When they changed the size of one of the black space maps that I was using.
Ah, yes, black space. It's dangerous to use that, but some of us like to live dangerously.
Broken NPC costumes, black space maps. Yeah, I'm just calling Mr. Dangerous.
Danger is my middle name. So let's see here. We did talk about some missions. Dragoon, you were playing Captain Revo's 5-part series.
I think I eventually finished that.
I think he
pretty
did
good.
too. You were talking about how it took him like 2 years to finish the whole series. Let's see, Hippie, you were playing, I think, Dark Frontiers KDF series. You were talking about how, because he was a PvPer, he spent a lot of time trying to make the combat difficult.
It wasn't necessarily. I think I probably back then called it difficult, but I think it was more attempting to introduce the rightest amount of intelligence into your enemies, make them appearing in flanking positions and all that. So, yeah, I loved that series.
Let's see. Captain PF Dennis is in the chat room. We were talking about one of his missions. I have spaced on the name of it, though. Something new at the time. It was whatever one he did that was like a shuttle mission, where you had to... Yeah, it was pretty good. You had to fly alongside a freighter. That was a really cool part.
Yeah.
We must have just gotten patrols or something. Oh yeah, and the space race mission had just come out.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, the little racetrack, Borg style. It's very cool. I kind of hoped we would see more of that, but I don't think we really have. At least not not any high profile racetracks. And I'll tell you, we were still talking about the rating system, as we have many times. I think specifically, Hippie, you were complaining about the default 3-star at the time.
Which they actually fixed.
Yeah.
Which they did eventually fix. I think there's no default star rating right now. You have to actually physically put one in.
Yep.
So, you know, I think probably the thing that struck me the most about going back and listening to that first episode was, you know, maybe some of the first episode jitters. I mean, you know, it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. You know, I guest starred on maybe like 2 podcasts before, you know, and one of them was obviously like an interview on Starbase or on Primetime UGC. So I didn't have to do any of the the moderating kind of thing that I chose that role for myself. So I was kind of new at all of that. I was new at the technical side of things. I was telling you guys before the show that I didn't realize that the recording software I used was still recording input from my microphone, even if I muted Skype. So you got like lots of breathing noise and typing and things like that. And I remember trying to edit as much out of that as I could. There are things like somebody's voice would start echoing through Mark's speakers or something like that. All kinds of first episode jitters, but we actually did pretty good, I think, overall.
I remember I had actually just
It was
started a
also
new-
back when I back when I used the built-in mic on my laptop and hadn't switched to using an external microphone yet.
I know it was,
Yeah, I had a different headset as well.
I had just moved and started a new job like a week or two before you asked me to come onto the podcast. So my entire life had completely changed recently.
It's not actually far off from me either. I had moved not too long before that. I was with the same company, but the next town over, which of course out here is a day's horse ride.
Well, are you going over the mountain or through the mountain? Didn't they carve a lot of tunnels around your area?
Oh, there's no mountains where I live, man. I'm on the plains. HippieJohn is the one who
I am the one
gets
in
to
the
be
mountains.
where I used to live. I missed it.
Oh, yeah. Colorado City is nice.
It's a beautiful state, but there's many kinds of beauties. Out here you get just acres and acres of sky. It's big sky country.
Every now and then in Colorado, you also have beautiful hailstones.
Well, you can get that lots of places. Let's see. I don't know. Any of you guys have any good memories of our opening shows?
Really, for me, it was just the fact that Brandon was willing to come on to the show with no idea what our format was really going to be, or it just really showed a lot of support, and it meant a lot for him to be able to just come on the show like that, with, like you said before, with no idea. He came on.
I think my oh, sorry, go ahead.
This guy
certainly boosted our ratings.
Uh-huh.
I looked at it today, and the YouTube version of that, obviously we put it up in several different places, but the YouTube version has 613 views, one of our highest viewed ever, and I remember 500 of those were pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite of any of our shows was the one where we had Kestrel on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed having
that was a great one. I mean, we've done 2 dev interviews and had Brandon on a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
The Kestrel interview was great because we talked about story and writing the whole time. I thought the interview with Joe Jing was pretty neat too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the interview with Joe Jing.
Gave us an insight into that character design and art design things that we, hadn't seen on a lot of podcasts because I don't think he'd done any others.
One of these days we'll have to get
yeah.
a Tumor Boy or Zeronos Rex on.
Definitely love to have that. Obviously, because they directly interact with the Foundry.
Well, Taco Fangs likes to lurk in the Twitch chat room.
He does, because of course he's still at work at this time, or was anyway. We're past 5 on the West Coast as we speak here, and who knows what time they go home. So I don't know. Any other favorite memories? Obviously, we've done a lot of different things. We've done mission playthroughs, which are a lot of fun. Coming up with funny accents and stuff. Um, I don't know. I think probably just good memories. Just sitting talking with you guys, talking Foundry.
I don't know, something that's kind of changed a lot is we don't see as many Foundry podcasts around as we used to.
No.
We had a few who have gone away since then. I'm sure probably Captain PF Dennis probably thinks in the back of his mind every so often, I want to do another primetime episode. But I know it's a lot of work to put one of
I was
those
going to say,
together.
is there a twinge of pain that comes in with that thought?
A lot, I imagine. But obviously we've lost Foundry Files. We've lost... was there something that Stoked used to do, or that was Foundry Files?
That was Foundry Files.
Yeah,
That was
Foundry Files spun
Foundry
off of
Files.
Stoked.
Yeah.
Well, which was the one that they sometimes had Kirk Fat on?
That was
Prime time.
Prime.
Yeah, that was
Prime
primetime.
Yep.
Bazag had a podcast for a while.
Yeah, Bazag stabs. Because that's what he does. But I don't know. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened in my life since I started this show. I mean, this year or last year actually. Now went to my first Star Trek convention and actually met a whole bunch of Foundry authors in the flesh, which I never thought I'd do when we started this.
And devs, right?
And devs. Met Tumor Boy. He is not, in fact, a large walking taco.
But we'll always think of him that way.
He is more or less human.
And in his off time, he apparently likes to tinker with various forms of machinery in his garage.
Well, we all got to have hobbies, right?
Yep.
The world needs more mad scientists.
It does. And of course, no Tumor Boy, I only tell the truth. Well, maybe I should retract that. Some say I only tell the truth. Let's go with that.
Except when it's co-host introductions.
Yes, those are blatant lies. I've never made any claims otherwise for that. And we've actually had quite a lot of Foundry changes in the last 2 years.
A whole lot.
A whole lot. Actually, most of it in the last 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you what,
something got into the devs, and they just and like several of them decided, more stuff needs to go in this.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I mean, neglecting the Foundry, they're just doing horribly.
That's good. Use reverse psychology on them.
Can't really maintain a
All these
neglect
changes
complex.
to the Foundry. All these changes to the Foundry, I just blame Tumor Boy and Zeronius Rex. I don't know who else was responsible, but I'm going to blame them because it's something that made me happy.
They've definitely been the spearhead. I believe
Some of them.
Let's see. Yeah, Taco says we're all hopped up on goofballs.
Whatever you're doing, don't stop.
Is that what the kids say these days? What was the other one? Thomas the Cat. I remember Thomas the Cat got in the Odyssey uniforms. That was awesome.
See, I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't know whether he actively, did anything to get those in there, or whether they just got in there because they became part of.
No, see, I'm remembering
cycle.
that. I was remembering that he made the effort to get them in there, like the ones that not the default ones, but the ones with extra stuff.
Okay, like
variants.
the long coat and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, something I can definitely attribute to Thomas is the Odyssey Uniform Guide, which I personally
Yeah.
found to be
Which is
absolutely
fantastic.
indispensable.
I use that in every Foundry mission. I went through and updated everything, going off that list.
Yeah. Yeah, having that has been a
I don't
huge
actually.
boon.
can't think off the top of my head where I've actually written a mission where I had a reason to use the default Federation costumes. I keep writing things where you're like off in deep space somewhere, either in uncharted territory or to something that's not Federation territory.
Well, any other thoughts, gentlemen, on the past 2 years?
Well, I would just like to throw
I
out
love that we have a lot more stuff to play with now.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the top 3 system pans out. I mean, kind of
Sure.
feels like that could be something that is a potential game changer, or at least a game upsetter.
If we get it working right, I'm sure I can think of definite benefits for it.
Now we just need to get it working.
Yes. Well, and by we mean not us, because we don't have any say over that.
Well,
I
I mean,
actually have no idea which of the devs to blame for it at this time.
one of the
Oh, well.
programmers. The
Yeah,
system
but
of some
which
kind.
one?
Well, you know, programmers, they like their privacy.
Why would we be
They hide in
blaming
the
them for
dark
something
shadows.
that's going to be cool, though?
Well, because it doesn't currently work, that's why. But I'm sure they'll figure it out.
No, but what we can do is once it does,
or we'll never see it again.
once it does start working, then we can start providing feedback on it.
Yeah.
It had one of those annoying things where something works in your test environment, then when you attempt to use it in live, you realize it has a horrible flaw that only presents itself when you have 2,000 people attempting to use it at once.
Unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
guys,
let's.
I was going to say,
Go
do
ahead.
you think we'll still be here in 2 years?
Well, who knows, right? I think we'll probably be here as long as the Foundry's here, because it definitely keeps us coming back for more. I mean, that's probably the greatest asset of the Foundry is that it keeps you. It can help keep you engaged with the game itself.
It really can.
So let's move it along to our usual segments. So let's talk about. Well, we can't really talk about what we've been working on because the Foundry's been down.
Lies.
Unless somebody's been writing. Anybody been writing? Plotting? Scheming?
Not exactly writing. I think plotting and scheming is the better idea. You were in the Starbase UGC chat room when I threw the idea that Baz and I are currently looking at around. This is the one that I talked to you about over Twitter, Dragoon. Baz and I basically are because he's the other one who seemed the most excited about what I was saying. Have been starting to come up with an idea for kind of a Foundry hub. The idea to just build and we've been brainstorming how that would work. And how to put it together and what kind of maps we're going to need. The whole idea is to build a hub, like a social hub that is a Foundry mission, that when you walk around in it, there are NPCs in there that you can talk to that might tell you, you might run into a scientist who's been studying things about the Midas Array, who tells you a little bit about this possible mission you could go search for, and then gives you the search information for how to find Dragoon's missions. Or you could run into, a Cation who's talking about this, who has a story about an alternate reality, and just getting other people's ideas into this big social environment, like social hub, where you go and talk to NPCs, and then those NPCs give you the search terms to go out and find other missions. And like, my general hope is that it's going to be a way to get other authors' missions that aren't in the top 50 list, because we were talking about the search and the ratings way back when, right? And to me, it's kind of still a big problem, the fact that you search that list for search all, and only 50 missions come up with no ability to search any deeper. So that's what I've been working on, is brainstorming ideas for this kind of hub idea.
Well, that certainly sounds interesting. I'm not quite clear on how it would work exactly, but maybe you're still working on that part.
Actually, I've got a pretty solid idea. The idea would be that there would just be a mission that you could find called, Starbase UGC or Foundry Hub or something like that. And then it's just one map that is a starbase. That is a couple of areas in a starbase, like a bar and a main operations and things like that, where maybe in the bar there is a Cation sitting in there and he's got a default dialogue above his head. So you walk in and you start talking to him, he tells you a little bit of a story, and if you're interested in the story that he told, he gives, you can get the information on where to go search for the Foundry mission he was just telling you about.
It's funny, almost...
Go ahead.
As you say, it almost kind of sounds like the original idea behind the Captain's Table. I meant the one from the books, not the one that's in game.
So essentially, you build this, and then another author, they talk to you, say, hey, can you include my mission? So you plop down an NPC that tells the player about this mission. They exit your hub back to the main game, and they have the name of a mission that they might be interested in. They can go find it.
Exactly. They have all the search terms and everything they need to go find it. And my hope is that some of the missions that are getting buried because they're not in the top 50, like authors might say, hey, can you put an NPC on there to talk about my missions, because they're not in the top 50 and no one ever sees them. And that's exactly what I want this to be, like a place where anybody can, yes, I'll put an NPC in there to tell people about your missions. Yes, please. This is the whole point of it, of what I'm thinking here, is get more missions in front of more eyes, kind of thing.
Sounds good. Bazag says he recommends using your Starfleet command map. Or no, Sir Boulevard says that. Your the Dragoon's Starfleet command map from his contest winning mission.
Yes. Which
is a pretty sweet map, I have to say.
Not sure how I get it to you, but I don't mind if you
just write down all the coordinates, which takes forever.
Relum Time says he's already thinking he'll make the bar and then blacklist me from my own mission. But yeah, other than that, that's all I've been working on. I haven't, obviously been doing anything right in the Foundry, so it's been down.
Well, I've also been doing a little scheming. I was talking to Pax in the last show about revamping my Romulan 5-parter, and I came to a bit of a decision that I am going to adapt it and turn it into Romulan missions for Romulan players. So it's going to take some doing, but I'm going to make it, kind of a follow-up to his mission series and to the Cryptic series. The ending in particular is going to have to be rewritten because it involves an attack on Vulcan, which obviously Cryptic has stolen and so I got to come up with some other kind of a thing. And so I'm thinking, the villain is a Romulan dissident movement, which is essentially the violent terrorist equivalent of, the peaceful Romulan Republic movement. They're sort of the equal and opposite reaction to that. So, what are evil Romulans going to do? They're going to find some way to, attack their own people and make it look like the Romulan Republic and the Federation did it. They're going to try and discredit you. So the question is going to be, do I have the player foil that plan, or do I let it have them fail? That is the question.
So you're thinking like some kind of
Do you have the the we win ending, or do you have the downer ending? We lose.
well,
And I don't know yet.
depending on how you
think
build it, maybe
that
you can
the
have
best
both.
way to do it would be a middle of the road approach, where it's kind of like a Pyrrhic victory for one side, where they win but they don't really win.
Which is actually, I had a little bit of that in the original. The original ending is okay. So they attack Vulcan, you win, but the Federation admiral that you've been working for the whole time, obviously, he let one of the founding worlds, actually two of the founding worlds, get attacked on his watch. So he essentially resigns in disgrace rather than face a court martial. And there's more shakeups in the Romulan Empire, and so it is a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory, as you say.
Well, I mean,
And yet, yes, Realm Time, the EULA says that Cryptic has all of the rights to my missions. I'm totally fine with them stealing it. I'm actually using this as an excuse to come up with an even better ending. Taking the positive approach.
I was just going to say you could do it in such a way that if it's taking place on the final map, you can have a win or lose scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then
certainly can. I've done that before.
Maybe
to set it up so that the final dialogue that pops up tells them which follow-up mission to play, depending on which ending they got.
Well, there wouldn't be any follow-up missions after the last one. So it'd be one of those where you could have at least a little bit of a branching decision tree, as long as I did it all on the last map.
could be some situation where if the player like just flies in guns blazing, you end up with a tragic ending. But if they can see the subterfuge in the plot and circumvent it, it ends up in a winning scenario.
Yeah. There's much to consider. I mean, when taking something existing and rewriting it this much.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I think actually most of it will lend itself pretty well to being a Romulan Republic mission. It's funny because actually they're just a thread started today or yesterday on the forums that Taco was talking in about, what is, talking about the galactic map and talking about, after the Cryptic Romulan arcs and the Riemann arc, what is actually the state of the Romulan Star Empire? And that's essentially what my mission arc always dealt with, and what it will continue to deal with.
Yeah, one comment that Taco made was something to the effect of how the Romulan neutral zone, as it existed in the TV shows, has never had any true meaning in Stowe because of the way the political climate changed in the path to 2409.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, basically.
And I pretty much treated it as if it was gone.
I mean, there's still a line drawing where, one side's Federation, the other side's Romulan, but it's just a line now. And honestly, crossing the line really doesn't seem to have any consequences, the likes of which we would have expected in the TV show. Because, in TNG era, they kept talking about how entering the neutral zone, not entering Romulan space on the other side of the neutral zone, but entering the neutral zone would mean risking war with the Romulans. And, of course, you'd probably get blown up by a squadron of Diderodexes.
I think the problem with Romulans now is the Star Empire is no longer strong enough to enforce the treaty.
Yeah, in the 2409 thing, it mentions that the Romulan Civil War that occurred in the wake of the Hobus disaster actually was bad enough that certain Romulan colony worlds attempted to join the Federation. Just because they look around like, okay, so I don't like option A, I don't like option B, and there aren't any other options that involve me not getting subjugated by option A or B, so I'm going to join the Feds. Screw the Romulan people.
I definitely read up on everything that was going on in the Romulan Star Empire since Star Trek Nemesis, which is essentially one of the latest canon things that we have as far as the timeline goes, and of course the everything that happened with the destruction of Romulus and how the Empire fragmented, and there were all these all kinds of political infighting, and Sela was, of course, right in the middle of it, got exiled, came back, reunited everything with an iron fist, or tried to. And of course, now the Tal Shiar was running amok, and Sela got abducted. Hakiv is dead. Where do you go from here? And my thought was, okay, the civilian Senate is going to try and reassert itself and try and hold on to whatever scraps of territory are nominally now the Romulan Star Empire, but it's not going to be a stable situation.
I actually kind of can't visualize that happening simply because of the fact that who controls the Romulan Space Navy?
That's definitely a good question. And when someone says something is a good question, it means they don't know the answer.
My best guess is the Tal Shiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they're going to control a lot of it, because that's the way that it went under Sela. And of course, Hakiv in the new missions, it seems like Hakiv is making some of his own. He has his own agenda.
Well, Hakiv
even independent of her,
and takes what used to be a Dideridex and slowly transforms it into something more akin to the Narada. I'm trying to remember. I think he actually does use that Borg adapted battle cruiser that you have in the Tal Shiar lockbox.
He does. Actually, there was an early version of that I think was on Tribble, but it eventually became the same as the one in the lockbox.
Well, in one mission, it might have been the Tribble version and not the finished version on holodeck, but he actually flies what looks like a Dideridex with the Borg set equipped to it.
I think he does in the Kittimer mission.
Yeah, there's like it's one of those things where it's meant to show a series of transformations. So first he shows up in a regular warbird, then he shows up with one with Borg things sticking out of it, and he shows up in one that has like all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah. Well, as soon as the Foundry comes back online, that's what I'm going to be delving right into, is adapting that, turning it from a Federation mission into a Romulan mission. All 5 parts. Some of that's going to be easier than others. And hope to get that back up as soon as I can. All right, let's see. I have a mission review for tonight. We got started with Rogue Enterprises' new initiative, which is the Foundry Strike Team, which is essentially, got a mission that's a new mission, new author, who knows what, but, somebody makes a request, somebody needs reviews. We got sort of a team of people who, once Rogue posts that mission in there, we can all go play it and get that person some reviews. Seems like a good thing, so I'm in it, and our very first one was, and my Latin isn't very good, so I'm sure I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Exitus Acta Probat, Part 1, by Lazharra. And this mission started off on a good foot with me right away because the mission door was very clearly stated in green in the dialogue and the summary. So that was very good. I actually started going in the wrong direction, but that was not his fault. It's because I forgot where I was going. But it was very easy to go back and find and remember where I was going. So
basically, you got lost in spite of him providing clear directions.
yes, I did. I am not too proud to admit it. So, it starts off with a search for a missing civilian vessel. And as you go through the mission, the mystery gradually builds on itself. It ends before you get any answers, or most of the answers, which is good because it is a part 1. So obviously there's going to be a part 2. I liked this mission a lot. I really didn't know what to expect going in because you never know if it's going to be with one of these things. It might be a new author, might be somebody who has no experience with anything whatsoever, and you never know. But everything was polished. You could tell he was in that stage where he's starting to add custom things to his missions, to his maps. He built kind of a wall of like an interior station into a cave. That was pretty good. Very good use of custom objects on the bridge, though I worry in one aspect, which is, okay, you go to the bridge of this civilian vessel once you find it. It's a wreck. It's, there's all kinds of fire and smoke. And in this case, I worry that he may have put too many effects in one place, and which might start giving people performance issues. People play with a variety of computers, a variety of graphics settings, and these things can cause a drain on it. So I would recommend him to consider dropping the number of fire and smoke assets on that particular map.
It's kind of like the thing with what Taco calls the horrible bloom effect. Because, what it is it's a very simple graphical effect, but it is essentially, replicated like 100 times or something stupid like that. And, one iteration of this graphical effect doesn't drain your system resources, but 100 of them, well, it's one of those things where when your camera pans to look at this object, it temporarily freezes when it draws the object on the screen. And then it moves very slowly every time it redraws the object.
Well, and sometimes you never know what's going to cause problems for somebody else who's using a completely different setup than you. My computer handled it okay. For the most part, I'm using this triple monitor thing now, which I'm running it at a just ginormous resolution, which very occasionally you get things that drop the frame rate where it wouldn't have before if I was just using, your average 1920 by 1080. So it's something for authors to think about. Too many effects in a small confined place.
Or just too many simultaneously
too many in one place. But other than that, it was a really well done mission. All of the dialogue was very polished. There was not any typos that I could see. All of the objectives worked. He had clearly gone through a lot of effort. It was well plotted out. It had me very interested in the mystery of what happened to this ship, which obviously I don't have the answer to because we don't have part 2. But I'm very excited to see it. So I would say that and let me take a look. When I played it, it had 5 reviews, and now it was just out of the review status. Let me check it now. Now it's got 11 reviews, so that still doesn't qualify for rewards, but that's okay. It's got a 4-star average. It's not too bad at all. And I'm definitely looking forward to part 2. and to any other missions that we play for our Foundry Mission Strike team. So if you want to be involved, or if you got a mission that you need reviews on, whether it's new mission, even if you're an experienced author, we've got a thread going in the forums. I'm going to put it into the chat.
And I will include it in the show notes.
You will include it in the show notes. Fantastic. Let's see. Anybody else got any mission reviews? I will take that.
I have been rather busy lately and haven't been able to find time to play any.
Well, obviously we got, big events going on in game, so Foundry mission reviews might not exactly be a priority for everybody. That's fine, because hopefully we will get the tool back tomorrow.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Me too. I'm really getting raring to go. Actually,
yeah, I'm ready for the Foundry to have the Foundry back. I really, really am.
We always get like that at the end of downtime, though, right?
Like I say, it's funny.
Yeah.
We haven't even hit the 2-week mark yet.
No. I mean,
it was down for one day, and I was like that this time. Yeah, I'm not having as much fun playing the game as I am making things and playing with the editor. So I want the editor back.
I'll tell you, if we have not had, the worst downtime was not actually during the period of our show, but we've had some lengthy downtimes and some some really bad bugs introduced by updates during the time we've been doing the show.
The worst downtime ever was the one in
the Dark Times,
season 4, where it was literally off for what, 5-6 weeks?
5 weeks.
The Dark Times.
I counted. Because I was kind of a different person at the time. I was a bit more ragey, and so I was the person who had a little counter going in my SIG saying it has been X days since the Foundry was online. I've obviously grown out of that.
Mostly. Baz is correct. I do have a review.
Once long ago, I actually had a Foundry SIG griping about something that the Cryptic devs did. It was in one of the previous events where there was like this game-wide lag. Granted, it was actually worse in that particular incident, but
we all grow over time, don't we?
In the later things, I've gotten to the point where I don't feel the need to be negative about things all that often, simply because of the overwhelming stench of nerd rage on the forums.
in general.
It's just one of those things like, okay, well, this guy, that guy, and the other guy already took care of the nerd rage, so I'll just be positive.
My only rage these days is actually directed at my fellow players instead of the devs, so which is why I stay off posting in the forums anyway, except for the Foundry section, because the best community out there is the Foundry community.
So Bazag in the chat room is saying, Hippie, you surely have a review, and he's prodding me because, in fact, I did play a Foundry mission very recently with Baz. I played one of his, I think he said it was his very first Foundry mission that I had never played before. So if we've got time, I've got a very quick review of it.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's the one that comes before his mission, Starfleet Experimentation. I'm trying he's in the chat room. I'm sure he'll throw the name of the one we played at us. Hidden Intelligence, or it's something like that.
That sounds right, because I've played that one.
Yeah, I think it was
many years ago.
And going into it, he said, "This is the mission when people started to call me Puzzle Baz," and I was like, "Okay, well, I like puzzles. This will be fun." And it was a lot of fun, actually. It was one of those where I know that, Bazag is quite capable of doing some really nice map work and some really cool things. But I was looking at this mission because he let me know beforehand that this was his very first. That I was looking at this, like, how do you look at someone's first mission? And I saw him using cryptic maps instead of, these days where he builds maps on his own and all of that. Starship experimentation, not hidden intelligence. There we go. And it hit me only in the last room that I had been doing puzzles, because I just enjoy doing puzzles. And all of a sudden, I find myself looking at this thing I need to get on top of a box, and I'm like, jumping puzzle, jumping puzzle. I felt like I was playing, Mario or any of my old favorite platformers, and I was just like, Baz, 5 stars for a jumping puzzle. And then there was another puzzle that came after it, which is a word puzzle. It's an information puzzle, making sure you have the information and then applying it in the right way. And what I found happening, surprisingly, was that I picked the right choice right off, and it made Bazag laugh. I will say it's a really, really great mission for somebody's first mission. That's it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. The environments work well for what he's using them for, and the puzzles are fun. And for me, just finding a jumping puzzle in a mission always makes me happy. So,
if you really love jumping puzzles, you should try Treasure Hunt with Teton, because that's really it's basically,
when you were talking about it before, I was adding it to my list of ones that I want to play.
It's basically just a giant jumping puzzle.
I like jumping puzzles.
So this is a good topic, actually. Let's talk about what makes because obviously you like jumping puzzles, and Mark has done one. So what makes a good jumping puzzle?
It can't be immediately, at least to me, the answer can't be immediately obvious. For example, with the jumping puzzle that I just did in Baz's mission, there was one crate that I couldn't jump up to and another that I could, but the one that I could jump to didn't apparently have the angle on the crate that I wanted to get to. So it took me a moment of walking around the piece of thing that it was an upwards jumping puzzle. So it took me a moment of walking around it and looking at I like to have to figure it out. It can't be impossible, but it should leave me saying, I failed this once or twice before I figured it out. To me, that's a good jumping puzzle. So...
Well, one of the observations that I've made about Treasure Hunt with Teton is that if you're not good at jumping, you're probably going to rage quit.
Right.
Because one of the jumps that you have to do is, these are those big 200-foot tall giant stone mushrooms. You have to jump from one stone mushroom to another one. If you miss, you fall to the desert floor, have to run all the way back to the start, and, go through all of the same steps that you went through to get up to on top of the stone mushroom in the first place.
So if that jump that I missed and I fell off and I went flying down to the desert floor is definitely doable, and I can see, looking at it, my character can definitely clear that. It's just a matter of I have to time it right and all of that. I will go back and run all the way back to the front and go through all those steps 5-10 times, and it won't bother me in a jumping puzzle.
One thing I realized after actually, I noticed it during the mission, but I didn't realize the actual significance of it, is that the desert rocks that are baked into the map that I use as the base are a different color than the ones that I can place on the map.
Well,
So you can see see where I place things on the map because they're all a darker shade of brown.
okay.
So, like, clearly delineating where you're supposed to jump is important.
I mean, it's one of those things where someone might not realize it when they first play the mission, because cryptic maps sometimes have things where there are multiple colors of rocks in the environment.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. And in this case, though, all of the stuff that's baked in is this tan color, or is it reddish? Something like that. And
It's kind of
the ones
reddish.
that,
I think I know
that
the
you
map
can
you're
place
talking
are not that color.
about.
So, whenever I hear jumping puzzle, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is, and this is probably showing my age, such as it is Qbert.
Ha!
If any of you youngins remember Qbert.
Wow, that would be an interesting, thinking about Qbert and how when you jump around, you're changing the colors and then you're trying to complete it. A jumping puzzle could be made really multi-layered with triggers if you've got, trigger points along the way to make new things appear and things behind you disappear and things.
About that. Nemesis Chicken already did that.
So? Just because somebody's done it doesn't mean it's not cool. I'm sorry, to me that's a horrible reaction to have. Somebody's already done it, so I can't do it. Just because somebody's done it doesn't mean that I don't want to.
I was just mentioning that, there is actually a mission that has done that, and the way Nemesis Chicken did it, you start with having only one box you can jump onto. When you jump onto it, two more pop up. If you jump onto one of those two, you get more options to jump onto.
Awesome.
Et cetera, until you get to the top.
That sounds really great, actually.
Actually, I'd kind of thought about that too. Something along those lines, because you remember we were brainstorming because somebody wanted like a sporting event. Foundry mission. And we were thinking about, ways to make it sort of competitive, and, sort of have like two different jumping puzzles going along parallel. And, whoever gets to the end first is the winner.
Right.
Could do something like that.
I think back when we were talking about the idea of trying to figure out a way to combine PvP and Foundry, one of the main ways we came up with was having like two people enter a puzzle maze thing at the same time, and along the way there are like things you could trigger that would like drop a block in your opponent's way or things like that.
That could be fun. I don't know, the couple of things I think of with jumping puzzle might be respawn points are a good thing to have. Because you don't want people to get too frustrated that they quit. And there was one by, and I don't even remember the name of the author before, that I was trying to review for the show once upon a time, and he had this huge jumping puzzle that went all over a map, and it took me like an hour to get as far as I did, and then I fell, and I had to go do the whole thing again, practically. He had one little shortcut that you could get to, but that just wasn't near enough. And I just had to quit. And I was so near the end of the mission too. I was a bit disappointed.
Is this that one where you go to this not a planet created by those weird sentient nanite things?
It could be.
I forget who wrote that mission. It's one I did a mission review on in a previous episode, because that one had some of the most insane jumping puzzles I've ever seen. He actually came up with a way to make it so that the only way to get up onto a certain object is to do a running jump. And you can't, unless you're a Cation, you can't walk up to the object and then like do like a chain jump or something. No, you have to stand back because what it is that the approach to the object that you're jumping onto is slanted downwards towards the object. So what you do is you have to move back so that you're at a location where it's high enough that you can jump up onto the object. Then you do like a running jump from there, and then you'll land on the object.
I just had a thought of how to, if you're making a jumping puzzle, if you're worried about your audience, you're worried it might be too hard for people, might frustrate people. Okay, add an option to have an easy mode, which is an interact at the beginning that spawns one of the low gravity volumes.
In his case, I think he did have an easy mode option, but his easy mode option wasn't that easy. Well, one thing that was particularly frustrating about the one that this guy did was that the base map he chose had an issue with what I call holographic rocks, where you have the interactable geometry that does not match up with the visible geometry. So you attempt to walk up on top of something in order to jump up on something else, and then have your character sink into the object up to their waist, and then realize the object isn't actually tall enough to jump onto the other object. I've never seen this happen with objects that players have placed on the map, but I do see it relatively often with the base maps because, well, to be honest, I have no idea why. It's just, it looks like when they were created, it was off.
I like what Bazag just said in the chat room in relation to all of what we're talking about here. Checkpoints, respawn, checkpoints and respawn points along the way is probably the way to go. I think you're right on that, Drogan.
And you notice that Cryptic did add checkpoints to their puzzle in the anniversary mission. As you're shooting the things to make the bridges go and you're negotiating that maze, if you fall, there's a couple of different checkpoints that you can start at in the middle instead of having to go back all the way to the beginning.
Yeah. Also, if you fall and you're almost to a checkpoint but haven't actually passed it, you will actually trigger the checkpoint because the way it works is that it sends you to the closest respawn point, not just the one that
you're going to get as long as it's been triggered.
Now,
and they trigger pretty far out usually.
Now here's a question, and I don't remember the answer to it. Can we set like a radius on the respawn points?
No, not really.
We can use the boundary? We can't.
No, there's no radius setting, and that's why I just know they go pretty darn far out.
Yeah, so it would have to take some testing. If you were building a jumping puzzle, it would have to take some testing of where exactly you trigger these things as you're going along.
This is true.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move it along because we actually had a kind of an interesting topic come up over Twitter today, HippieJohn. In response to something that you said. You were talking about one of Gecko's recent interviews, and I have not listened to it, so if you could tell me what he said.
This morning, at some point, Ceridium and the folks over at G&T, Terry and Nick, they released their interview for the 5th anniversary with Captain Gecko. And unfortunately, Nick wasn't there or whatever. So it was Sori and Terry talking to him. And we all know that he's recently talked to Felicia Day about wanting to get Felicia Day's voice into the game somehow because he's a big fan. She's kind of a nerd/geek icon. And their conversation, one of the things that Gecko said was, wouldn't it be cool to have her appear as Reg Barkley's daughter? And people may or may not have read this review I did of Delta Rising online a while ago. But it really raised my hackles a little because I was like, ooh, like, because as soon as he said Felicia Day in his tweet like a week ago or what have you, a bunch of people who have played a couple of really cool Foundry missions called Will and a Barkley and One Too Many. And One Too Many was spotlighted at one point until Earth Space Dock got changed around. And the author, I think it's, I don't remember it, I want to say XR377, but
Yeah, that's
I
what I
could be
think.
wrong. That's what I think is who I think is the author of these two missions. He created Reginald Barkley's daughter, and these are two absolutely brilliant pieces of storytelling. There's hands down, they're some of the best work the Foundry has ever seen. And
Yeah,
just,
actually, it is XR,
it is
XR-377, and
right
One
on.
Too Many is currently an active spotlight.
Awesome. See, there you go. That it seems to me that once before, or maybe more than once before, some of the content that has come from Cryptic has bore something of a similarity to pieces of Foundry content. Missions that people have made, or characters that have appeared, etc., etc., etc. And no Foundry author has ever even gotten so much as a thanks for the inspiration, or, we know for a fact that by signing the EULA, they own everything we make. We get that, right? We understand that. But it still would be nice, and somewhere in my mind, I believed that the people at Cryptic would be the sort of people that if they do come up with like a Reginald Barkley's daughter story, they would at least have, they would at least pay lip service to say, and thanks to some of the inspiration for this coming from player XR-377, whose missions can be found in our user generated content tool. It's just, that's what I would like to see, because these missions already exist. Like, there's two missions out there, and what I think he was reacting to was after he tweeted that he was going to be talking to Felicia Day, a bunch of people started talking about those two missions, and I think he reacted to that. I don't even think he realizes that there's two missions out there that star Reg Barkley's daughter, and they're awesome.
Well,
and
to be honest, I really can't visualize Gecko as being the kind of person who would know every Foundry mission there is.
It's not even know every Foundry mission there is, but he's now on a podcast making it sound like it's that Reginald Barkley's daughter. It's I guess what it is for me is inspiration comes from a lot of places in our work as writers, as designers, and as creative people, and we can't pay homage to it all. We can't say everything that inspired me. But when it is something that, in this case, if they do get Felicia Day into the game, and Felicia Day does indeed play Reginald Barkley's daughter, if there is, I will say right now, right here, without a doubt, that if that happens and there is no sort of recognition of the fact that their user-generated content already produced something like this, I will rage quit. And I'll do more than rage quit. I will just rage. I won't even rage. I'll just leave. If that happens, I will lose all faith in them as a company that respects their players and the user-generated content that the Foundry tool is able to produce. Because that when I heard that this morning, that his first thought of Felicia Day is make her play, some Reginald Barkley's daughter, I was just like, no, it really did. It twisted me around.
So I kind of interrupt in here. It's really difficult to tell the difference between inspiration and parallel development.
No,
Coming
it's
up,
not. Not in this case, it's not.
It
Not in
it
this
it
case, it's
feels
do
not,
you?
because She has been in those missions have been in the Foundry since before I started the game 2.5 years ago. That means that's not parallel development.
There's no
That's
no
not
way to know
people.
whether Gecko has ever even heard of XR377's missions.
Or XR377.
Yeah. So
Yeah. But it's still not parallel.
We can't assume what's going through his mind. We can't assume where the idea comes from. He may not even be aware where the idea comes from. Maybe he did hear it at some point. Maybe he did see a tweet from somebody talking about these missions, and it gelled in his mind. But I can't necessarily condemn them right off the bat or anything for thinking about it.
Not right off the bat for thinking about it. But
it's also possible that he just independently derived the idea because of the fact that, well, I mean,
okay, Mark, I'm sorry. Independently derived the idea. He tweeted, I'm going to be talking to Felicia Day. A bunch of people respond to that with, hey, what about this Amanda Barkley character in the Foundry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 2 weeks later, he goes on a podcast and starts talking about having her play Amanda Barkley. That is not.
Did he ever say Amanda?
Obvious to me. No.
Did he ever say Amanda?
No, he said Barkley's daughter.
Okay, well it is entirely very easy to come to the conclusion of having Felicia Day play Barkley's daughter because Felicia Day also frequently plays quirky characters, similar to Barkley.
But would he have come to that conclusion if a bunch of people didn't respond to his tweet that he was trying to court Felicia Day for a role by saying things like, there's this great mission, a Will and a Barkley, one too many? If he had, I'm sorry, for me, it doesn't wash. It doesn't
I'm sure he gets a metric ton of tweets, like hundreds, if not thousands of them.
I'm sorry. I'm glad that you guys can believe what but I'm maintaining my right to disagree with your assessment of it.
I'm just saying there's another possibility here.
There are other possibilities, sure, and it may be handled with the utmost grace. Honestly, with the stuff I've been seeing coming from them recently, especially with Steven Ricosa as the new EP, which makes me happier than you can imagine. Everything that's coming out recently is great. And I'm not even saying that like him, the mention in this morning's podcast when I listened to it wasn't bad in any way, and you're right, it is kind of a she'd be a great Barkley's daughter. That does that does in some way make sense, and there are other possibilities, but he is aware now because you know what, I tweeted him directly.
Did he respond?
Probably not. I haven't even looked. So I've never gotten a response from Gecko, not once in the whole time I've had a Twitter. But I just a 2-week period of I'm going to court Felicia Day. A bunch of people say, "Hey, Barkley's daughter, wouldn't she be great for that?" I actually remember somebody saying that before he said it.
He's been talking about Felicia Day for years now. Felicia Day is not a new development for him.
Years? I disagree.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's been on his list of people he would love to get into the game for literally years.
As Bazag pointed out, it's probable that he had an idea in mind before mentioning Felicia Day at all as to what character they would have her portray if she did voice work for Star Trek Online.
See, for me, it's happened so this one could be handled, like I say, with the utmost grace. But in my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, there is currently a very popular queue in the game that is highly inspired by a Foundry mission. And there's no doubt. There's no doubt at all about that. And anybody who wants to talk to me about it privately, it's not something I'm going to go into. I go read my review. There's no doubt about that one. And just right now, because of that, this whole idea of inspired by UGC content man, like, if I see it happen again, I've already, in my mind, I've seen it happen once. That in my mind, I've seen it happen once that they effectively stole with no credit. It's not stealing, because the EULA lets them take whatever they want and everything we create is theirs. But they were heavily inspired by a Foundry mission, and there was no credit given to the UGC author that had to do with that inspiration. And if I see it happen again, I am going to lose a whole boatload of respect for them. A whole boatload.
I don't know. I just think you run into tons of problems when you try to assign intentions to devs.
It's not intense.
Because you aren't privy to their thoughts. You aren't privy to their conversations. You know, I don't know. I have a hard time projecting that onto them. Because I mean, I've had it just happen to me. You know, I was just talking about it earlier in the show where I have this mission that I'm going to rewrite now because, you know, the mission came out 4 years before Cryptic did this revamp of the Romulan series, and now they did have an event that happened in my series that I made 4 years ago. I have no reason to believe that out of the 88,000 Foundry missions that there are,
right,
someone at Cryptic saw that mission and said, "Oh, I want to do that." I have no reason to believe that. I have no reason to believe it couldn't happen.
So I guess in this case,
but there's no way to know. And you know, if they came out and said and put a little tag on it and said, you know, this was inspired by a Foundry mission, that'd be great.
That's all I want. That is it. That what you just said, that's all it takes for me to think that they have a little bit more integrity than I'm currently able to give them.
Yeah.
You know,
and that would be great. I'd be super proud, but I still have no reason to believe that they didn't come to that idea independently. It's not a stretch for me to believe that.
So I guess the reason that for me it's a stretch is the one that I'm talking about that I talked about in my written review online is one of, if not the most played Foundry missions out there. Yes, it's a grinder. Yes, it's a combat mission, but it is. I've heard Captain Gecko speak the name of the mission in interviews previously. So that one, yeah, they're aware of it. And then they went and made a queued event that is almost just like the mission. And so this time we're talking about, you know, as we went and looked, the second one Too Many, is still a spotlight and has long been one of the most popular story-based spotlights. So, you know, these are two very high-profile missions that I'm talking about. Not, you know, it's not like one of the hidden 88,000 like most of my missions, right? No, it's one that's in the spotlight and one that constantly sits at huge numbers, both in ratings and plays. I get, you know, and that's just where I'm coming from. You know, they, like I say, they could handle it with brilliance and grace. And like, you know, and as I say, Drogan, the only thing that I need is what you just said. The only thing that would make me feel like they had the kind of integrity I'm looking for is that it doesn't even need to name the author. This mission takes some inspiration from things seen in our wonderful user-generated content tool.
It's entirely possible that they're going to feel that following up with what XR did would be too constraining and instead choose to do a completely different character.
Okay, I wouldn't expect them.
I mean, I would expect the character is not going to have any relation whatsoever.
I wouldn't expect them to actually use XR377's missions, but it would be really nice to see when they do, if they do a mission that has Barclay's daughter in it, that they included just a little line at the end, you know, at the end of the mission description, some ideas inspired by.
You know, one thing that occurs to me that from an in-universe standpoint seems like it would be reasonably likely is that Reginald Barkley would actually name his daughter Deanna.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure, but
I'd probably
But
name it
yeah.
after someone from Voyager's crew and call her Torres.
and I like your question too, Drogan, this afternoon on Twitter. Like, I mean, the question it's a larger question than just
the larger question is, what about this of having Cryptic take characters that were developed by Foundry authors and bringing them into official content.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously
own
they
it.
can. They own it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think it's kind of a
obviously
cool idea.
we've made many fun characters over the years.
Well, I mean, there is actually, that duty officer who was named Helna and apparently uses the same face as the, Foundry.
Oh, that's definitely a homage.
Yeah, that was
It's the only one I can think of, though.
The original example of something from UGC making it into the game proper.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a little bit of precedence. She's not a big part of anything other than being a DOF, but I think it'd be pretty cool actually. I mean, if Cryptic said, hey, we want to use your character, I'd let him do it.
I don't know if they would ever break the fourth wall inside of a mission to kind of give out this sort of acknowledgement, but I could see it being something that was maybe talked about in a dev blog.
Yeah, Sir Boulevard put that in the chat room, and I was going to say, yeah,
that's a great
even that'd be perfect, And
it would, if they have taken inspiration from Foundry Mission and they want to put that in there, that's a great way to promote the Foundry itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's a good suggestion. Obviously, if they do want to use a character of mine, I recommend my Admiral from the missions that I'm going to be working on, but he can only be played by Billy D. Williams. There's that. That's the only way it's going to work.
I kind of assume that anything in my missions, as soon as I publish, is fair game for anyone to steal.
Of the original characters that I've done, the two that I think are the coolest are, well, one of them is someone who I can't really visualize Cryptic using because a Borg Vorta from an alternate universe that we don't even know which alternate universe, mind you, just some random alternate universe where the Founders did a little bit more tweaking with the Vorta than they did in the main universe. Well, Endless is cool, but I can't really visualize them using it. The Ojor, on the other hand, is someone who is basically this tactician who sits back and tries to figure out what's the best option to do. And, of course, Cryptic has never used the Boslik race for anything, so,
Captain P.F. Dennis was saying they're welcome to use Crazy Chalaski, but he wants to do the voice.
Well, you actually couldn't because they're SAG now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, and then of course I mistyped, so it became even funnier. All right, well, I think we will end it here, guys.
We're right up at 7:30.
Thanks for a great 2 years, and here's to another.
Yeah.
Yep. See you guys next week.
Before we go,
throw up our contact info.
All right. If anyone wants to reach us, we can reach at email@foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Mark here can be reached at Markhawkman, and I can be reached at Greendragoon, and HippieJohn can be reached at HippieJohn.
John, I don't remember my own Twitter, so don't.
I think it's the John with the JOHN.
All right. Well, we will say goodnight.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for 2 years.